Jane Eyre absolutely has daddy issues. I support women's rights and women's wrongs. And I think I cried 5 times reading this. Guys, this story, I think, truly encapsulates what it means to love someone unconditionally. Hey my cinnamon rolls, welcome to this video. So I'm so excited to be filming this autumn book recommendations video. I've been waiting all month for it to finally feel like autumn, because for some reason it was like 20 degrees, sunny, blue skies for like the first 3 weeks. But yes, autumn is literally my favourite season. For me, autumn is just the perfect time to be reading as well. It feels like such a great time to like slow down and really immerse yourself in a good book. So that's what I'm going to be doing today, because I just love the feeling of like being curled up on your bed and with a cup of tea and a blanket and a good book. So let's get into it. Firstly, the book that comes to mind when I think of autumn immediately is Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. It's a story about the main character who meets the widowed Mr. de Winter whilst in Monte Carlo, and after like a month of getting to know each other, he proposes and she joins him at Manderley, which is like the big estate that he lives at, but she realises that not everything is as it seems. Manderley kind of has this, it's shrouded with the presence of Mr. de Winter's recently, or like deceased wife, Rebecca, and Rebecca is like this ghost that permeates through like every crevice of Manderley, every interaction that the protagonist has with all the other characters. She's always living in Rebecca's shadow, and it's so interesting because the book is named Rebecca. Like, we never find out what the main character's name is, which shows how she feels so inferior. So not only do we get that really interesting exploration into her as a character, but it's such a cleverly written book with so many plot twists that you don't see coming. It's so atmospheric. It's just quite unsettling because it's like the ghost of Rebecca is just always there, and Maxim de Winter is like such a tortured soul, like take him to the tortured post department for real, like and Tolerate It, actually, fun fact, Tolerate It by Taylor Swift was inspired by Rebecca, which is why I initially read it. There are parallels to Jane Eyre in this book, which brings me on to the next book, which is Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. Like, look how pretty this version is. Jane Eyre is about Jane Eyre, and we follow her life path from her really rough childhood where she felt unloved and abandoned, and her journey to becoming a governess for Mr. Rochester, who's like low-key kind of ugly, but he has major aura. And Jane Eyre absolutely has daddy issues, but I love her because she's so like headstrong. Like, if something doesn't feel right, then she won't give in to what other people are pressuring her to do. And there is a lot of pressuring in this book, but she sticks by her morals and her own beliefs. Mr. Rochester is also a tortured soul, taken to the tortured poets department, and there's someone in the attic. So this book also has a very nice atmospheric, slightly like unsettling mystery aspect to it as well. And then going along with the whole mystery thing, Sherlock Holmes by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. Like, that's just perfect for autumn. I've not read the books in a while, but they're such a classic, and every year I rewatch the TV show with Benedict Cumberbatch. Wait, hang on. This is what I found at a charity shop and I couldn't resist. It was like 75p. It was so funny. I'm not actually like a massive fan of him, but couldn't resist. TV show on BBC iPlayer is so good, would recommend. And then if you guys did English literature GCSE, you know what's gonna come next. So firstly, I would definitely recommend Macbeth. I think just with the witches and like the magic that corrupts Macbeth and the land really makes me associate it with winter. That reminds me, so in Lady Macbeth's monologue, where she says like, fill me from the crown to the toe top fall. So in year 9 drama we had to do that scene, and there was a girl in our class and she said that, like, fill me from the toe to the crown top fall, but in a really breathy way. So you can understand what it kind of sounded like. But yeah, that was just a random funny story. And I think this is just like such an interesting depiction of like manipulation and toxic masculinity and what people sacrifice in their pursuit of power. And I think it was pretty easy to read, especially with this version. I love Lady Macbeth, you know. I support women's rights and women's wrongs. And then next, Jekyll and Hyde. This version is super ugly because it's the school one that has massive space for annotations. So get a pretty version if you're going to read, if you read it. But I think, so this is by Robert Louis Stevenson. It was very atmospheric. It had really interesting main character, who is Dr. Jekyll. He's this really respected member of society, but he has a deep dark secret that honestly, if I was reading this as a Victorian, I would have been gagged. Like, the plot twist would have absolutely shocked me. It talks a lot about like the subconscious and like animalistic desires and how humans at the end of the day, we are no better than an animal, like from what we've evolved from. But it is a pretty accessible read. My favourite line is when he says, "If he be Mr. Hyde, I shall be Mr. Seek," because Mr. Hyde is like this this do-no-gooder, and Mr. Utterson, who the book is from his perspective, he is determined to like find out and convict Mr. Hyde. And with autumn being the season for pondering and self-reflection and questioning the self as well, what better than to get into Stoicism? So Meditations by Marcus Aurelius, although it broadly talks about like Stoicism being separating yourself from external circumstances and allowing yourself to not be affected and living life like it's your last, the individual methods and perspectives will depend on the individual. So I'll try and include like some of my favourite quotes somewhere here, but genuinely I think I could split my life into before meditations and after meditations. It has had such a huge impact on me and it's definitely upgraded my life. And so on to like 2 litfic recommendations I have. The first one being One Day by David Nichols, and this book kind of broke me. It's like a heart-warming and then heartbreaking book, and the reason why I associate it with autumn is low-key because it's like originally kind of set in Edinburgh, and Edinburgh as a city just embodies autumn. It's about Emma and Dexter, and they meet at Edinburgh University, and pretty much like every July the 15th for the next 20 years they meet, and it's about how their lives change and the struggles that they face and the character development as well. Like, you really see them go through their ups and downs. These characters just feel so 3D, their emotions feel so like tangible, and I think I cried 5 times reading this. It definitely makes you reflect on the idea of like right person, wrong time, and I think like the invisible string theory as well, because they're like so made for each other. And it's a great TV show as well. You will need to bring tissues, but great TV show nonetheless. And then I would also recommend The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V. Schwab, and this is a book that is more slower and character driven. It's about Addie LaRue, who makes a deal with Luke, but like French, so it's like Luke or something, who isn't the devil but kind of is the devil. Like, I still don't understand what he is, to be fair. She makes a deal where she can become immortal and like travel the world, but the catch is that nobody remembers her until 300 years later, kind of, when someone called Henry does. It's like a story of hope. There's a lot of diversity and representation in the book as well, which I loved. It's a very like raw and vulnerable book, I think. And then I would also recommend The 5 People You Meet in Heaven by Mitch Albom. This book follows a man called Eddie who works at a theme park, and then one day he has a tragic accident, and upon waking up in the afterlife he meets 5 people who tell him about how much of an impact he's had on their lives. It makes you really think about like the connections that we have with other people that we don't see, and it's so moving, so heartwarming, and it's pretty short, so a nice quick read. And then for the last lit fit book, I don't know why I said 2, there's like 4, I would recommend Before the Coffee Gets Cold by Toshikazu Kawaguchi. This is a story about a cafe that serves coffee, and if you drink it in the cafe, as long as you return before it gets cold. You can go back in time to any life experience and basically relive it, so it helps the characters like move on in the present moment. The writing style is quite simple, which can be good and bad, but it's a very quick, cozy read. The first YA book that I'd recommend is Divine Rivals by Rebecca Ross. And guys, this story, I think, truly encapsulates what it means to love someone unconditionally. It follows Iris and Roman, who are both like competing for this position at a newspaper firm that they both work at, and it's got a war in the backdrop. And Iris's brother has gone off to fight, but he's a missing soldier now, and so like free therapy, she has this typewriter and she writes letters to him, and the letters disappear, so she's like, oh, maybe it's like magic and the letters are going to him. But no, the letters have gone to Roman, who has the other magical typewriter, and so their typewriters are like linked. It's such a beautifully written book. It's got an amazing cast of side characters as well, so I definitely recommend this. And then the next YA book that I'd recommend is the Cruel Prince trilogy. This follows a mortal called Jude, and after this like really traumatic experience actually, she is forced to live in the fairy world, and the fairies there are not a big fan of humans, so she kind of always lives in fear, and so she trains herself to be like really strong and so that they can't hurt her. I definitely will say that it's more on the fantasy side than romance, so if you're looking for a romantasy that's half split, maybe just like bear that in mind. But the enemies to lovers in this trilogy is so good, so I ate that up. Like, I read this book in an afternoon, I'm pretty sure. I didn't like the first book, The Cruel Prince, as like, I gave it 4 stars, but I thought Jude was a bit annoying and I wasn't entirely sold on it, but then my friend persuaded me to keep reading, and I'm so glad that she did. Like, the character development was just so well written. And so 2 romances. So the first one I would recommend is The Secret Society of Irregular Witches by Sangu Mandana. And this follows someone called Mika Moon, and she's a witch, but she posts videos on TikTok like showing her magic, but under the pretense of filters and green screens and whatever, and not expecting anyone to actually think that she is a witch. But then one day she gets a message from someone asking her to train these 3 young witches who are starting to use their powers, but they're not really able to control it. And there's such strong found family like aspects to this book. There's like a grumpy ex-sunshine romance as well. That sounds so goofy to say grumpy ex-sunshine like in real life, sorry. And then lastly, I'd recommend Bride by Ali Hazelwood, and this is a book about the vampire called Misery, and her dad is like the head of the vampires, and as collateral she gets sent to the human world so that if the vampires were to attack the humans, Misery would be Misery ends up in a marriage of convenience with the alpha of the werewolves called Lo, and she agrees to it because she thinks that he might have been involved in the disappearance of her human best friend Serena. And it's such a goofy book. Like, if you're looking for a romance that will make you open your eyes to the world, maybe this book isn't for you. But if you just want a silly, goofy book, like, he's literally called the Alpha. It doesn't get sillier than that. It is actually quite interesting, the plot. You have the politics between the werewolves, the humans, and the vampires. I really like the female friendship in this between Misery and Serena. You've got like found family aspects as well, and there's like plot twists too, surprisingly, that I didn't expect. So these were all of the books that I would really recommend for autumn. I've got so many more, to be honest, so let me know if you guys want a part 2. And if you've reached this far, thank you so much. I love you so much.